Okay, so we're going to give this a shot. I've used other recording software in the past. I've never used this one, so if it's shaky, I apologize. Also, I'm at school right now, so there's some ambient noise, but we'll make the best of it. So, hey, this is going to be mostly review. We're going to recap the Industrial Revolution part, and then we're going to move on to new material and see how far we can go. So, we talked about this before, the geography of England, right? That's going to be a big player in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This is important. It shows up on AP tests a lot. The first country to industrialize was England. They're going to lead the early industrial age. There's a lot of reasons for why. One of the big ones is they had a lot of rivers. We talked about this before. We talked about it during the Viking Age, how rivers used to be a bad thing. Because the Vikings would come in and be able to follow, with ships that could come from the ocean, following the rivers and go anywhere. They could be anywhere in England without any notice. However, that technology, or those rivers, eventually will lead to helping England, because the first power source of the Industrial Revolution is going to be the water wheel. Pretty easy to use. So they're going to be used to power early machines. England also had a lot of coal and iron, which is going to be close to the ground, coal and iron too, top level of the ground, which is going to be giving them an advantage when it comes to early materials. Next big one, England's going to be a leader in agricultural changes, which is going to push for a need for industry. What was going on in England with agricultural? A couple big changes. The enclosure movement, you're not going to see so much on AP World anymore. I put it in there. If you're curious about it, look up. But basically, smaller farms started shrinking down, and we started to see the creation of gigantic farms developing in England. Meanwhile, we've talked about this before too, the Columbian Exchange. New potatoes, corn, tomatoes, peanuts, all these high-calorie crops came into Europe and China, different places of the world. Whenever you see an increase in calories, you also see an increase in babies. That's was true until very recent history. Next, crop rotation. Crop rotation, once again, this is something you've probably learned in science class in elementary school, but this was a breakthrough. People didn't have the fertilizer technology that we do today. However, they started to figure out that, hey, if I plant corn one year and I plant corn the next year, well, I don't get as much corn, because now we know it's because corn takes all the nitrogen out of the soil. They didn't know that. But what they did start to experiment with was, okay, well, instead of planting corn this year, the next year, how about we plant beans or something else? And then they plant corn the year after that. What they found is that they kept consistently high yields as long as they kept rotating out which crops they were growing. They were thinking scientifically, they were making observations, they were doing experimentations. They didn't have the paradigm. They didn't have the understanding that we do today about why it was working. Today we can talk about the nitrogen cycle, and we can say, well, corns versus growing corn one year and then legumes the next. Well, that will put the nitrogen back in the soil that the corns needs. They didn't understand all that, but where they were starting to figure out how to get consistently higher crop yields every year. And this is all basically taking place in England. Columbian Exchange was all around the world, but the enclosure movement, giant farms starting to develop, crop rotation. These are going to be early leader. The early leader is going to be England. Next thing's up, and this is a big one, the seed drill. The seed drill is a fairly simple machine. It kind of looks like a wheelbarrow here, right? But the seed drill is one of the early machines that was used for agricultural purposes. And the basic idea was it allowed people to plant their seeds in a much more organized way. For most of history, going way back to ancient Egypt, the way people would farm is they would go out into an open field, till the soil, turn up over all the fresh soil, get rid of all the rocks and whatever else anyways too. They would throw seeds down, literally just throwing them down. They would usually walk through the field with a bag of seeds that they accumulated from the year past and just kind of throw them, waving them through into the fields. And that'll work. That'll get the seeds out there, but they're going to be all over the place. Then next thing they would do is oftentimes stamp them down, either with their own feet or using animals. So they would go through and have the animals walk through, and the animals, of course, would help fertilize the field, without going into details on that. But they would basically help plant the seeds in this way. Incredibly chaotic, not very well organized, not generally a great way to plant crops. Imagine weeding it when the plants are growing all over the place, right? It's going to be almost impossible. And also, you're not really efficiently using your space. Some of the plants are going to be crowded together too closely. Some are going to be too far apart. You're going to have big gaps in your field. So Jethro Tull invents a machine that's going to plant seeds in an organized fashion. It has a wheel in the front that'll cut a hole basically into the ground. Then it will place the seeds. The wheel turns and it will plant only a certain amount of seeds into a row right at a certain set time, and then it covers it back up. All you then have to do is push this machine down, and your plants start to grow in rows. Obviously, today we have tractors and heavy machinery that does this all for us, but this is one of the first relatively simple machines that is going to lead the industrial age. Invented by Jethro Tull, English inventor and farmer, and he's going to basically show people that it's possible to plant seeds in a very cheap, very inefficient, or a very efficient way that's relatively inexpensive. This is going to show people that machines were efficient and they helped you. They literally help people with their lives. That's a big mind change. In our age, in our time, we just assume that, yeah, of course there's a machine, there's a computer, there's artificial intelligence, there's some kind of technology, and that the future will always be progressing. For most of history, this was not true. For most of history, technological growth was very linear. You did the same thing that your parents did, that your grandparents did, that your great 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 grandparents did. Now people are saying, wait a second, machines make lives better. Machines change things. They give us new technology. They give us, more food and in relatively simple ways. And it's going to blow up from here. So now we are in a situation where England is really leading. Okay, they have some people starting to challenge things, kind of growing out of the Enlightenment, questioning, can we do things better? They have people challenging and coming up with new ideas. They've got a lot more food. Their populations are increasing. What could possibly go wrong?